Hey there, welcome to Authentically Raw. I'm your host, Jamie Berris. Today's guest is Cameron Normand, and Cameron, you have an extensive line of accomplishments. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Take the stand.
Sure. So I'm Cameron Normand. I am CEO of This Custom Life, where I help stepmoms who want more. And I am also co-CEO of Step Family Magazine and co-founder of the Stepmom Summit and host of the Stepmom Diaries podcast. So I do have my hands in a lot of different places.
It sounds like you're an expert at step momming to me.
Well, it's funny, I got into this a few years ago when I became a stepmom and have really, I got certified to coach and have been learning so much along the way. And I don't know if I consider myself an expert, but I definitely consider myself as someone who has access to the experts and can pull together like all the best resources for stepmoms.
Definitely. So tell me about, your journey into becoming a stepmom, how you I would even like it if you could cover, what you did a little bit before, where you were at in life when you met your husband and how everything came about.
Yeah, so it's funny. I have been in the DC area for almost 25 years and have built a career in politics and had been, I'd built a really nice life for myself. I was making good money. I had my own home, I had a ton of friends, traveled, all this stuff. And, obviously I wanted to find my, person, but it just sort of hadn't happened yet. And I was pushing 40 and, I was kind of like, well, maybe that isn't for me. And I've got this really fulfilling life and that's great, and enter Craig. And we knew kind of immediately that this was different than anything we had ever had before. And so we got engaged fairly quickly and he had 4 kids. And so I jumped in with both feet to stepmom life and sort of realized, I thought I knew a little bit about what I was getting into because I had been a stepdaughter. I know you have too, since I was 8 years old. And so I kind of felt like I knew like things not to do at least. And um, but then when I got into it, I realized I had no idea. and and being the type A, I'm a lawyer by background, I was like, okay, where's the handbook? I'm gonna get
Mhm.
online and, see what I can find. And I found there was no handbook and there really weren't that many accessible resources that felt like they talked to me and to what I was going through. And so I started digging into it to figure out what would work for me and figured that if I was out there looking for this stuff, that probably a lot of other women were also out there looking for this stuff. And it turns out that's totally true. There are like 1,300 step families form every day. And that statistic, by the way, is actually pretty old. It's not an updated statistic. It's actually more than that, I think. Um, but there are just a ton of women out there who are really looking for good, research-based tools and information and really just looking for help and to know that they're not alone because it is much harder than, again, like I thought I knew a little bit about what I was getting myself into, but it is much harder than, anybody can possibly imagine until they're sort of knee deep in it.
Yeah. No, oh my gosh, I'm billowing with questions all of a sudden because yes, I'm not a stepmom, but I've had a stepmom for nearly 40
Yeah.
years and she's wonderful. I I'm curious because with not being a mom first, all of a sudden inheriting 4 stepkids, I can see where that would be really challenging because you hadn't even been parenting your own kids and then all of a sudden you are in a parental role and but there is a mom a biological mom and their father and where do I fit in, what do I do? I mean, how what was your my question would be,
Yeah.
I'm curious to know what was the first moment that you felt I need some resources because I don't know how to deal with this. Was there one big thing or was it just all of a sudden like, okay.
Um, there were a couple of things I think. I didn't being a stepmom, you are a parent, but it's a really different type of parent, right? Like you're not a mom, you're not a dad, you're a stepmom. And there are dynamics that come with that that I think I didn't fully appreciate when I got into it. And so I sort of was treating it as if I was an instant parent, like instant, and everybody always says when you marry somebody with kids, like, oh, you've got an instant family. Well, you have an instant family. It doesn't mean that feels like an instant family. You know what I mean?
Maybe
And
not an instant bond or instant trust or yeah,
totally. And
it's
I
time to
think
build a relationship.
yeah, I mean, one of the first times that I really was like, what have I done here? Where did I go wrong? Was we got married in April. The kids moved in. We had 50% split. The kids moved in over the summer, and it was really, we kind of had the summer, let everybody get used to it. And then for the school year, we were like, well, we should have, school year starting, we should figure out allowance and like what the house rules are going to be and all that kind of stuff. And, what the consequences are going to be for, if if chores aren't done and what that's all going to look like. So Craig and I kind of sat down and we parent very similarly. We've got similar outlooks on all that stuff. So we kind of came up with what we thought it should look like. And, he, to his credit, I mean, Craig has always really wanted me to be a full partner on this journey with him. And I love that because he involves me in everything. But I didn't really realize that being a full partner didn't necessarily mean being a full parent, right? So when we sat down to talk to the kids about house rules and structure and all that kind of stuff, Craig said, well, I really want you to be part of this family. So why don't you, tell them, why don't you lead the discussion? And I was like, yeah, sure. Sounds great. Yeah, that did not go well
Say the kids are
at
like,
all.
who are you to boss me around, right?
Basically, yeah. And the kids, I mean, there was one that, Craig and I had thought up, like the kids should keep their doors open. And so I kind of went through that, and my oldest stepdaughter was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? What do you mean you're not doing that? Like I just did not at all think that it was gonna go down like a lead balloon,
Right.
Well, what I didn't know is that as you're figuring out your role as a stepmom, you really shouldn't be engaged in rule setting or discipline with the kids. It's great for you to do that with your partner, but like for the kid facing portion of the relationship, and it's not that you need to be like fun stepmom, but you don't need to be doing the discipline. They don't need to see you as like some other adult coming in. That's not what they want. But until you've got to establish the bond with them first. So it needs to that bond needs to be fully in place because they've already got that bond with their parents. So they'll accept discipline and stuff like that from their parents. They're not going to accept it from you because they don't have that bond yet with you. And I had no idea that I just did not understand
Right.
that dynamic. But research has borne that out. I mean, that is like a hard and fast rule now for me. And I had to kind of learn all that and then sort of sit down with Craig and set that boundary with him and sort of reset our expectations for how we were going to handle this. And so, I think it's natural. I mean, Craig was kind of like, well, so wait, I have to be the heavy all the time. And I was like, pretty much. Yeah.
Because you
Sorry.
don't bond with kids by coming in and saying, okay, here's the
Absolutely.
rules. Here's, I'm Mrs. Disciplinarian. And no, that is not how to bond.
Absolutely. It's not your role. It's not your
role. But it does make me think, okay, so what is your role? Because it's not your role to be a best friend either.
Yep. So, and that's a great question. And my short answer to that is a little glib. Your role is what you determine it to be with your kids, right? So I kind of I had individual conversations with each of the kids, and I said, look, I'm not your mom, I'm not your dad. You and I get to figure this out together, and we get to figure out what we want our relationship to be. And so, I kind of had some deliberate things that I did along the way to sort of try and establish that bond with the kids. So like my stepdaughter and I started a tradition around Christmas where we go to the Nutcracker every year, and that's like our thing. But every kid, you're going to have a different relationship with every kid if you've got multiple stepkids, right? And every kid is going to be differently receptive to you. So like you may have one kid that accepts you with open arms and you establish that bond really quick. And you may have other kids that are more hesitant, and you may have kids that are like, yeah, sorry, not interested, you know? So you have
Mhm.
to kind of navigate that and figure that out for each child.
Yeah, I thought of two things when you were talking. Number one is role model. Find your role, which
Hmm.
you can be a role model, and you can role model just even respect and honoring each other's boundaries and things like that. But then also find what you can connect with, because it is going to be different with each kid, and not
Yeah.
all the kids are going to want to go to the Nutcracker, but maybe one of them, and I even think of just simple little things, because I have a stepmom and a stepdad. I mean, there are different ways to connect, and it could be, okay, just a shared interest. It could be a conversation. It could be maybe for one kid just stocking that favorite treat when they are at your house. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be probably something big, but it forms a relationship or a bond, or yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be super structured all the time, and it certainly doesn't have to be like forced stepmom fun. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you don't have to be like, okay, every Sunday we're gonna do a bonding activity. No,
Yeah,
not at
because that'd
all.
be exhausting for you too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's looking for ways to spend some one-on-one time. So like, can you be the one to pick them up from school? And like every day you're having a conversation like, how was school today? Did Billy pick on you? Or, what's going on with Susie? And kind of getting to know their life that way. Or, practice or whatever. I mean, it could be establishing kind of a tradition. It could be that, I know with one of my stepsons, he really loved Marvel movies. So like we would go see all the Marvel movies together. So like he knew when a movie was coming out, he could be like, hey, did you see the preview for this? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, we're going, you know. So I mean, it looks different.
Right. And it kind of reminds me of maybe the label of I'm a supportive parent. It's a support to the biological parents. I don't know. I mean, I guess when I look at my step parents, I can see where they're there to parent a little bit, in a healthy, appropriate way, but they're there is support, to their spouse, truly,
Hmm.
in the parenting of their children.
And supporting the children. I mean, I think one of the ways that I have tried to carve out my role with the kids is like letting Craig do the discipline and like, hand out any consequences that need to happen. And then letting me kind of come back kind of after him to the whichever kid it was and to say, hey, I know that conversation was hard. I know you're probably pissed that, you are grounded or, whatever it is. Like, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah.
And that way, I can sort of hear them out in a way that like maybe they didn't feel comfortable saying all the stuff to dad.
Mhm.
But then I can also sort of say, well, I think what your dad is trying to do here is this. And so, I'm not in that like best friend role because that's not really your role, but I'm not in that parenting role. But it's somewhere in between where you're still being a support for them and you do have an opportunity for a really unique and valuable role in their life.
Mhm.
It's not
Well, and
always going to be smooth. I mean,
no,
it can be
no.
really rocky.
But really what it sounds to me like you're doing is sharing Craig's perspective. It's not throwing him under the bus, yeah, and agreeing and trying to be their buddy. Yeah, he's so tough on the discipline, or it's not, well, he's right and this is why he has to discipline you this way. It's just, I think this is his perspective. How do you feel about it? Let's talk about it.
Yeah,
And
just
that
hearing them
opens,
out.
exactly. It just opens that line of communication. And then they, like you said, you're not disciplining, but you're there supporting and how you
Yeah, and
make
I
it
think,
move.
more than anything, I mean, kids want they have very few needs in life. They want to feel safe, they want to feel loved, they want to feel heard.
Yeah,
And so if you can provide those things, I think it goes a long way. And so,
right.
if you can make them feel heard, I think that's fantastic
Mhm.
and it's a great role for you to play.
It's funny that you say that, and I think so too. And I've noticed this in my parenting over the last couple of years. Instead of offering advice or my feedback, it's just so that they feel understood and validated. Basically, you just repeat back to them what they said. Oh, so you
Hmm.
feel this when your dad does this? Mm,
Hmm.
thanks
Yeah,
for
what I'm
sharing.
hearing you say is that you're feeling a little
Yeah.
down because you feel like
And
maybe dad was hard on you or whatever, and
right. And that's so easy
well,
to do. That takes
yeah,
all the pressure off of us. And they're just like,
yeah.
yeah, you get it. That's
And
all
I
they
think
want.
asking them a lot of questions like, well, you feel down because you feel like dad was hard. Well, how do you feel about what it was that you did?
Mhm.
What do you think you know, what do you think your punishment should have been?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. How do you,
And
or even if dad responded this way, how do you wish he would have responded? Why do you think he responded the way he did? Huh. And then no judgment, just,
yeah,
I'm
just
just curious.
listening. Just
Yeah.
listening.
So I want to ask a little bit about boundaries because I mean, I know a lot of stepmoms, I have friends that are stepmoms,
Mhm.
and I hear a lot about when there are things like, say, there are rules that are being broken, and it's when it's brought up. I'm going to use an example of, say, social media. And I know a stepmom that her teenage daughter was posting what she thought was kind of some inappropriate stuff on Instagram, like poses in a bikini or things like that. And when she mentioned it, to the daughter, it got back to the mom, and the mom was basically like, mind your own business. And at what
Mhm.
point, how do you, because there are certain things, depending on their age, I mean, maybe if they're even toddlers or things, there are times you do have to take a little bit of discipline in the moment and be like, hey, that's not right. I mean, there is a right and a wrong, and there are times like that. How do you deal with that boundary? Like, what's yours and how do you cross it? And if it is crossed, like, tell me your take on boundaries, because that's a tough and really sticky spot.
Yeah, and that one actually, that example comes up a lot. I mean, I can't tell you how many stepmoms I know that have had that or something similar come up. I mean, social media is just really hard, I think, especially with teenage girls. Um, in that particular situation, although it's not a discipline issue, that's an issue that I would really encourage a stepmom to let her partner bring up with the child. I don't
Mhm,
know that it helps to have her do it if it's something that the child maybe isn't going to be receptive to, or the child may
mhm,
view it as a parent coming down on them.
mhm,
Um, I think that's really something that the partner ought to be bringing up. And so I would encourage a stepmom to really use that as a co-parenting with their partner opportunity, and have their partner kind of lead and facilitate that discussion with the child. And then that keeps them out of having to deal with mom, especially if that's maybe a high conflict thing, or maybe mom really does feel like stepmom's stepping on her role. I mean, that sort of takes that dynamic away from it. You know what I mean?
exactly. So I'm curious, this leads me to another question. My mind, oh my gosh, just this conversation, my mind is swirling with questions for you. So what, and I'm sure it's different for everyone, but the communication, say, between you and their mom, and potentially, maybe their stepfather if she's remarried or anything like that. Like, how do you navigate how much contact, or I don't know. That's a really open
That's
question,
a
isn't
loaded question.
it? It is loaded.
I think it really does depend on your situation. I mean, for us, my husband and his ex have a very high conflict relationship, and so within probably about a year of us getting married, I had to sort of start setting some boundaries that, like, I was not going to go to because it made me uncomfortable. I tried to limit my contact because it just was unpleasant.
Mhm.
Um, that's not always the case. I mean, I think you have to figure out what works for your situation. But, I would say if there is something where you're uncomfortable or it's unpleasant, like, she's not your ex. Like, let your partner deal with it.
Yeah,
Like, let them work stuff out,
yeah.
and set that
Mhm.
boundary for your own peace and sanity. But
Right.
it can be really hard, especially, if there's trash talking going on at the other house or whatever the situation is. It can be really hard, and it can be really hurtful. And, as stepmoms, I think, unfortunately, and there's not a real great way around it. I mean, you do have to take the high road a lot of the time, and something
Yeah.
gets back to you about that's been said at the other house or whatever, and you really just, the best course of action is to not engage directly. And if it comes to you from the child, I think it's completely fine to correct the record and say,
Mhm.
that's not actually true about me. And, I'm sorry you heard that, but really setting those boundaries and trying to preserve your peace is the most important
Yeah.
thing.
And it probably has to be done very loving and gently
Hmm.
because it's still their mom. And any trash
Absolutely.
talking, yeah, is not going to make
Well,
them
yeah, and that's a
dislike their mom
cardinal.
like you better.
Yeah,
At all.
that's actually, I should have mentioned that up front. I mean, that is a cardinal rule. Like, don't trash talk mom ever,
Mhm.
because even if it feels good in the moment, mom always wins. That biological connection is always going to be stronger, and
Mhm.
you're only going to hurt your relationship with your stepkids if you trash talk mom. And that's just, it should never be done. Again, you can correct the record. Like, if something gets back to you, you can say, that's, I'm sorry you heard that. That's not true. And here's, what I believe to be true. But don't trash talk mom. Don't call her a liar. Because remember, that's 50% of the kid's DNA. So all that does is make them feel bad, make them want to defend mom, and it just doesn't improve anybody's relationship in the long term.
Exactly. Agree. And even, say with your husband, like with Craig, it's probably a good check to always be aware that he doesn't also trash talk
Hmm.
the ex-wife in front of kids. It's one thing for you two in private, but I mean, I think,
A
especially when there's
100%.
conflict, divorce, it's not going to make those kids like dad better if dad points out mom's faults or mom points out dad's faults. It's no, it's whoever's trash talking. That is, I mean, as a stepdaughter, or
Hmm.
when there's conflict between parents, it's not if you point out that parent's fault, I'm going to start, disliking that one. That's hurtful to me because I love them and I love you, and it hurts me when you trash talk, and it's
Exactly. Exactly. And
yeah,
it just shouldn't be done. It's
no.
very tempting, but you really have to stop yourself in the moment and put the kids first, because all it does is hurt their feelings. And,
Mhm.
you know, when you're criticizing their other parent, you're kind of criticizing them, because that's 50% of their makeup. And they
Mhm.
love that person, but also that person is in them. And so, they
Mhm.
internalize it, I think, a lot more than even they articulate. And it's hard. And sometimes you have to just kind of take a deep breath and walk away for a minute
For sure.
and
Oh
go
my
and like
God.
pound your pillow and come back.
Exactly. And I mean, it's just human nature to want to defend yourself, but that might not be the most helpful thing all the time,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
definitely.
really hard. And sometimes you slip up, and I know that, like, we've had instances where, one of us has said something and we're like, okay, I shouldn't have said that.
Mhm.
Didn't mean it. And you have to, if that happens, you just own it and move on,
Yeah.
and make sure that the child knows that, that's not your intent.
Yes. No, that's beautiful right there. So I have a couple questions because especially when they're school age, all of say like the sports and we're entering college. I mean, there's so much to do as far as buying equipment, signing the kids up, who takes, or okay, there's the sign up list for the snacks or the team dinners. And when you have these kids going from one house to the next, like how on earth do you divide who does what? So the time, the energy, but also the financial side of it. There is a lot involved there. What is your take on that?
Yeah. There is a lot. I mean, there's a lot. And again, it's another one of those situations where you have to figure out what works for your particular dynamic. I know for us, the kids, it's a 50-50 split, and it's like every 2 weeks. And so generally for us, whoever has the kid on the day of the game or event or whatever is responsible for the getting them to and there and whatever else, that may come with that. Um, but it depends. And I know that there's so many different custody arrangements. I mean, I have friends who do like 3 days and then 2 days and then switch weekends, which all just sounds very complicated to me. But
Right.
I like the 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. It's much easier to calendar. But
Yeah.
I know, like, I personally keep like 5 calendars on my phone, because I have my work calendar, my business calendar, my joint business calendar, because I've got a couple of those, and then the kids calendar, which is that has all of the kids' scheduled stuff, but also the custody weeks, and that's one that we share with my husband's ex. And then we've got another calendar that we share with the kids as they kind of get old enough to do all that. So, I mean, it's just a lot. It's a lot to balance. But you just do. I mean, I think it's like any kind of, like motherhood, like parenthood. I mean, it's a
Mhm.
lot and you just sort of figure out how to do it. But there are, we have not used them, but I believe there are some apps and stuff like that that can also help organize between houses, especially when there are high conflict situations and stuff like that.
Right. Because I can see where there would be a lot of pointing fingers. Well, this is your responsibility. No, it's not. This is your responsibility. And it becomes more of a parental issue in the kids' well-being, or, it can get
Yeah,
taken out
the
of it
money
because there's
stuff.
conflict,
The money stuff can be hard,
Yeah,
because divorce decrees don't usually get into the weeds of like who's going to buy Johnny's soccer uniform, or whatever.
exactly.
And yeah, there can be like a lot of nitpicking and sniping, and it can be very unpleasant, especially if you already have like a high conflict situation. My only advice there is keep those communications away from the kids.
Mhm,
Don't, you know, if it just don't, the kids should not worry about whether their uniform is getting bought, and they shouldn't care who buys it for them. They should just know they're going to have a uniform. And so, you know, the parents need to work that out amongst themselves and not involve the kids.
mhm,
Like that
definitely.
stuff just doesn't need to be their concern. And I think you
Mhm,
can think about it like in a first family where the parents are married or partnered, the kids aren't going to know who's going out and getting them that. They're just going to know it's provided for them. So
right,
that should not change.
definitely. And I even think as the kids get older and, high school or going off to college, it's okay, kids need to start to be more responsible for themselves, but there's still a lot of things. I mean, I even think of, I have two in college and all of the work it takes to help with the college applications and that whole process. And I can see where you have more than two parents involved where it could get kind of sticky of probably more, I guess that goes back to the boundaries of what is, you want to be a help and a support, but how do I do it in a way where I'm not taking over a responsibility of a parent who truly wants to do that and get offended, and then you've got this kid in the middle that is
Right.
confused. Who do I ask for help? I don't want to upset this person. I mean, I can remember as a kid, even when it came to holidays when I got older, and I'm 16 now, I have a license, and it's holiday time, and you get to choose where do you want to be on Christmas Day and for how long. Gah. I don't want to choose.
Yeah,
I want it done over my head because whoever I'm not with, I feel bad for. I feel like they're going to be
a
mad at
hundred
me.
percent.
I mean, there's so many things to where, and I love that you say all this should be done with the parents over the kids, and because I mean, they need to be responsible for certain decisions, but that some of those decisions are very, I don't, that can be really tough.
Yeah, I mean, I think as kids get older, it's just important to sort of reinforce to them the unconditional love and care that you and their parent, that you guys have for them. And, hey, look, we're here for you. We're happy to like read over your essays for college admissions. We're happy to help you with, studying for the SAT or whatever. And I think it'll usually, with us, it's sort of kind of naturally fell to the right people to help and do. Because I think by that point, the kids sort of know, like, okay, well, dad and stepmom were English majors, so maybe they're the best ones to help with the essay,
Yeah, yeah.
Um, if mom's a scientist, so maybe she's best to help me with like the math stuff on the SAT or whatever. And they kind of figure that out. But I think for holidays and stuff, I mean, we're navigating the very beginning of that because we've got a senior in high school right now that's going off to college. And
Mhm.
um, I what we've said to her is just, look, once you turn 18 and go off to college, there's no more custody arrangement for you. Like, it's up to you when you come home where you want to be. And we obviously would have you as much as you want to be here.
Mhm.
But we know you want to see your mom too. And so you just have to figure out what feels right for you. And we're here,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
And we've said, like, if you want help figuring out like what feels fair or whatever, like however you want to split it up. If you want to say, well, I'll do this Christmas with you guys and next Christmas with mom, or vice versa, or whatever that looks like. But just letting them know that like whatever they choose is okay, that they need to do what's right for them, and that you're always there for them, and you want them around,
Right.
as much as they want to be around. And
Definitely.
really at that age, they're more interested in hanging out with their friends anyway, let's be honest.
Exactly. No, that's for sure. Definitely. Oh, you've covered so much stuff. I mean, amazing things that, I mean, I'm not a step parent, but being a stepdaughter, I, like you said, you don't understand what the step parent's going through until you're really
No,
truly there.
definitely.
And it does look different for everyone. You mentioned about a summit or summits that you do. Tell us a little bit about that, or where people can get more information.
Yeah. So we host an annual Stepmom Summit, and we're going to be announcing dates for the 2023 summit very shortly. The website is thestepmomsummit.com. You can find me at thiscustomlife.com, and then Step Family Magazine is stepfamilymagazine.com. And I'm on social under all those handles, and I'm easy to find, and happy to talk to anyone who needs help or resources or just wants someone who knows what they're going through.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, 13,000 new step families every day, and that's a really old statistic. So, I mean,
Yeah, 1300.
or 1,300. Okay. Well, it's
Although
probably
I don't,
13,000 by now, right?
I know.
That's just in
Yeah,
the US,
just in the
correct?
US.
Just in the US. Yeah. I mean, and that is the thing. We should all be given that as a stepmom, a handbook right off the bat. And there,
I
there
know.
just isn't. And we need these support things just like with anything else in life. Just, yeah, for sure. No. Thank you
Absolutely.
so much, Cameron, for your time. And
Yeah,
I will
thank
have all
you.
of your information in the show notes too. So if people want to check out anything. So great advice.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you so much for being here as we kick off this podcast together. I really appreciate you joining me on this journey because I'm well aware you could be doing or listening to anything right now. Hey, if you enjoy the Authentically Raw content, please support the show by following, rating, and reviewing on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. You can also follow me on social media for daily inspiration. Head over to my website, jamieberris.com, to sign up for weekly transformation tips. Or if you're interested in coaching, I currently have 3 openings for one-on-one coaching. If you're looking for an empowering community, we'd love for you to join us in the Transformation Tribe, our group coaching membership. More info available on my website under the Life Coaching and Membership tabs. One last thing, I'm rooting for you. Be real, be raw, be authentic.